So if you do have questions along the way, by all means, please pipe up. I'm in presenter mode, so I can't see like the chat. If things are popping up there, if Daniel, someone else would pop in and let me know. But don't hesitate to ask as we're going along. And you know, I'm happy to go off and answer stuff as things come up as I'm blabbering on. So again, thanks for having me in. This happens to be something that a topic that I'm well versed in, and it's pretty passionate to me. For some odd reason, I seem to enjoy getting into situations where systems, services, projects are kind of a wreck and trying to help them straighten up a bit. So the first thing is, I've got my deck out on speakerdeck.com, not SlideShare, but SpeakerDeck. Also, if you hear a lot of odd noises in the background, apologies. I have two 110-pound dogs who are deciding that they're wanting to fight right behind me. So apologies. I promise they're not murdering me yet. Anyway, speakerdeck.com, you can find this deck. So I'm Jim. I am currently the Director of Quality Assurance and Performance at Construct Connect. If you have questions that come up after the talk, feel free to reach out to me via email. I'm happy to follow up. I'm not on Twitter, but I do have a blog. It's been inactive for a while, but I've written there on everything from bread making to leadership. Speaking of leadership, I wrote a book on leadership. It's out on LeanPub. Pretty proud of it. It's small, it's concise, and it's got actual practical examples and exercises. Okay, but on to this thing. So most of us, I'm sure, if you've been in software development for any amount of time, have run into systems or projects that are a train wreck or a really bad train wreck, or maybe even a flaming train wreck, or there's always the floating dumpster fire as things are going. Or if you're involved in SharePoint, then it's a flaming outhouse, but I can't help you with SharePoint. So the thing is that we as tech geeks, as we get in deep to these problematic systems or services, whatever, and a lot of times it's from our own, like we've shot ourselves in the foot. We've helped ourselves get into this bad spot, and we step back and we just want to burn the whole thing to the ground and restart. But here's the thing, it's very, very rare that any organization can give their development and delivery teams the ability to stop work for an extended period of time. I'm not talking about component rewrites or pieces of a system or service. I'm talking about the whole thing. You don't generally have the ability to stop work and delivering value to the company for a year or more while you rewrite stuff. You can't do it financially. I mean, the company has to pay the bills, right? I like my salary. The way we get that is by keeping our customers satisfied and happy. And maybe we're not doing that, but we can't stop work and rebuild everything. So this talk is about ways to help understand how you can fix parts of the system while continuing to deliver value. Product or sales or whoever is kind of driving your strategic roadmaps, you know, they want to keep pushing out new features. They want to keep making the customers happier with newer things. They want to sell more stuff. And we need to be able to support them in doing that. So I don't have magic answers. This is hard work. What I'm hoping to do is give you some ideas on how to go about negotiating and coming up with some scope to where you can start fixing some of the worst parts of your system as you're moving along. So I've kind of broken things into 4 different parts. And the first one is reaching a consensus about whether or not we actually do need to fix the system, the thing, whatever. The next part would be figuring out what we need to fix, followed by how are we going to actually do the fixes, and then the work and making sure that we're changing habits that got us to the bad place that we're at right now. And each one of these different sections of this talk has some specific outcomes. reaching a consensus, coming up with a prioritized list of goals and having some ideas about what the level of effort is around there. Moving down, we'll start to get ways of getting more tactical to actual work items on your backlog. And then actually, how do we go about building good working stuff and avoiding getting ourselves in, staying in the same rut that got us here? So let's start out with just that first basic question of, should we fix it? And this is a really valid question. So the outcome of this section is a consensus on whether or not change needs to happen. But one of the important pieces here is that as people on, this talk's mostly focused toward people on the kind of technical and delivery side, right? PMs, testers, developers, maybe your DevOps type people. We tend to think in very kind of technical aspects, which is all cool. That's why we do what we do. But too often we don't relate things back to business value. How are we helping the business do things better? And the question that we have to help frame is, will us doing this work of repairing parts of the system or, whatever, is it going to bring the business more value? And so to answer that question, we kind of got to do Avengers Assemble and bring together the entire team. And this isn't just the typical, what we might think of as the delivery team. We need to expand that audience because we have to get a realistic picture. And so that means, yes, we include the devs and the testers and the project managers, the scrum masters, whatever, product owners, but we also want to broaden out the voices in this conversation. We want to bring in people from support. We want to bring in the ops folks because they've got some frontline views about the impacts of the system. Bringing in users directly to the conversation might not work, but you should at least have a good understanding of how users, the real humans who pay your bills, are responding to what your system or your service or your platform is like. And you've got to have execs in this conversation because the executives are the ones who figuratively and literally write the checks that will enable you to divert from just focusing on shipping new value to fixing some of the mess that we've got. So you get all these people in a room or on a Zoom call because that's how everything happens. You may also consider bringing in an external facilitator to kind of run that conversation because it's going to be tedious. There's people who are angry about the way things are. There are product and business people who want you to ship things faster. And these discussions can get kind of tense. Sometimes having a facilitator can really help you get a better conversation to evaluate and agree, here's the current state of things. And this isn't, so I'll frame it as a conversation. It may be a series of conversations and meetings. But the thing is, you want to keep this at a high level. If you're opening up repositories and tooling and Jenkins server and history reports, that's the wrong place to have this particular conversation at. You want to focus at a higher level. Things like, are we having long ship cycles? The vast majority of the industry is nowhere near continuous delivery of value. And it is what it is. But are you taking a year to get releases out because of the problems with the system? Like one release a year, regardless of what your domain is generally way too long. You want to make that faster, but the system may be preventing you from shipping more fastly. Yeah, whatever. Are you getting late to test? By that, I mean, it is crushing when organizations have a hardening phase or a regression cycle. And I'm in the middle of those right now, and I've been in the middle of them in the past. We want to try to minimize that. But if we're getting late to testing, we've got a hard fixed release date, and we keep shrinking the amount of time that the testers have, then the testers are overwhelmed and they can't keep up and they're not getting their side of the work done because the whole system is broken. What about your dev and ops folks? Are they having kind of a high stress level? Support is the front line of all of the bad things that are happening because they're the ones who are having to take the brunt of the angry customers who are paying you, hoping that they can just use your stuff to solve problems that they have. And if the customers can't do the work, then you know what? At some point, that's going to drive down sales or get you to the point of where you've got no sales. And you know what? Having money really helps. So the thing is, by getting all those people into a conversation or series of conversations, you get the input from support, you get the input from ops, you get the input from product and sales, and you can come up with a notion of, are we meeting our mission? So I realized that not every organization has direct revenue impacts to paying customers, but the notion's still there, right? Even if you are an internal organization that provides support to an enterprise, you have the notion of some type of value or revenue, right? So don't get overly fixated. Just keep in mind that your group exists to solve a problem somewhere. And with the current state of things, can we meet the mission? And that's a really good question to ask as that entire group. And this is part of getting to that consensus of, do we need to change or not? The important thing is that often we as tech geeks miss some of the strategic considerations because either we're not paying attention to what the roadmap looks like or we don't understand the business. All of that's a separate discussion. But as part of this bigger discussion here, you need to take into account those strategic considerations. The product or system, whatever you're working on, may be on a glide slope to actually hit end of life. And if that's the case, then it likely makes little sense to spend much time or effort on fixing and repairing parts of the system. You may need to shore little pieces up, but if they're going to get rid of the line or the service in a year, it doesn't make sense to do big fixes, but you got to be aware of that. If you are on something that's considered continuing to provide value to the company, then hopefully at that point you can, with all of these different viewpoints, get an agreement that yea and verily we need to change. We need to improve how our product runs. We need to improve how we're doing delivery. And so then we can move on to the next phase, which is figuring out, what do we fix? And this is where we're going to take a look at specific pieces of value within the system or the product and figure out what we got to address. So the output of this particular exercise is we're going to come up with some prioritized goals. It's not going to be really granular, but we are going to need to have a level of effort estimate, not an exactimate, but an estimate, so that business and the entire team can start to figure out that, yes, we need to keep shipping new value, but if we understand sizing and complexity of particular pieces of work, we can probably weave in fixes as we're continuing to deliver value. And if you don't remember any slide other than this one, I was phrasing that badly. This is the one slide, the one concept to remember about this whole talk. If we're going to succeed at this, we have to figure out how to interlace us continuing to deliver new value to the customers while we are paying down technical debt, while we're re-architecting pieces, while we're fixing egregious crap in our system. Because this is how it's going to work. We keep delivering new value, but we fix stuff along the way. So for the fixes, business has to drive the goals, meaning in a previous incarnation, I've been a developer and I've written all kinds of bad code. I've written some good code. I love just tinkering around in code bases, small refactorings, renaming, making things more pretty. But you know what? I can get lost in that for days, and it's not actually helping the business reach any goal. It's just me satisfying my own ego or my desire to tinker with stuff. So as the technical folks, we have to always keep those business goals in mind. And business thinks in pretty concrete terms. Business wants to decrease risk. For example, are we losing revenue because we are seeing decreasing sales, or it's costing us so much to maintain that we're shrinking our revenue margin? Do we have security problems which might open us up to lawsuits? Nobody likes that. So decreasing risk around getting sued is a good thing. And again, are you losing customers who are getting tired of your crappy instability and quality? That's bad. So decreasing risk is one thing that we need to think about. Conversely, increasing value is the other part of this equation as we're starting to figure things out. Can we lower support costs, right? Because if I can lower support costs, I'm increasing the revenue margin, and that's good. If we're improving our quality and we're improving how we ship, we're likely going to sell more stuff. And by fixing parts of the crappy code base in the system, it's probably going to enhance our ability to ship things faster because we've got all of this weak, crappy stuff and we're stabilizing it. And just to hammer home, everything around the technical stuff that we want to fix has to support business goals, because this lets us talk to the executives and the product team in terms they understand: revenue, better licensing, lower support costs. So as I go through the rest of the talk, I'll probably focus some of the conversation around a couple concrete examples. Let's say that we've got a pretty serious bug that when customers log on, occasionally they will see profile information from a different user. Like, it's user Bob and he's seeing user Jane's information. That's bad. That's a big security issue. And particularly if you get into PI information, privacy or credit card stuff, holy crap, that's a huge risk. Let's say that we've also got an online retail system, and when users go to check out, we're calling out to a third-party billing provider, right? Go Bill Visa, Go Bill Discover, whatever, PayPal. We have a problem where intermittently those transactions, those invocations to the third party are failing. And so what happens is a user tries to check out, it fails. They try to check out again, it fails. They try to check out again, it fails, and the user gives up and goes to a different supplier. They're stopping using our service because of our crappy stuff. And the third example is like a recommendations engine. So, the idea that you've got, say, a bunch of household supplies in your shopping cart, the recommendation engine should be providing hints on other products that you might be interested in. Well, if I've got a bunch of grocery, pantry, sundry items in my shopping cart, and I'm getting recommendations for snow tires and duck blinds, that doesn't really make sense. I mean, I like snow tires and duck blinds are cool for hunters, but they don't really match. And the point here is that we're losing revenue opportunity because of a bad engine. So this is kind of three concrete examples of what you should be looking at when you're working with business to figure out what the broad areas are to focus on. So as we look at those areas, so we've narrowed things down from the whole system is a mess to these three specific areas that we want to focus on. Have a look at what the current state looks like. So in those areas, how many open bugs do we have? How many bugs have we fixed and closed, meaning that there's a lot of churn in that area? That's a pretty good hotspot and an indicator that, man, this has really been hurting us with a lot of rework. What about your support costs? Are there a lot of support tickets around those areas? All of that helps you build a better picture of the overall impact of those 3 problem areas that I just talked about. And now is the time to actually crack open some tools and have a look at the code base. You know, there's a lot of code bases that look like this. Oh, wait, that's Unicode for the steaming pile of poo. We have a Unicode character for a steaming pile of poo. I love the internet. So as we're starting to look at the code base, we want to take a look at things that cause us grief. What about dependencies? Do we have a whole lot of interwoven mess within the code base, or a lot of really hard, brittle dependencies that are external services, like the billing provider, or maybe we've got other internal systems and they aren't particularly stable? But again, for those areas, like, keep those concrete examples in mind. For each of those, what do the dependencies look like? Crack open your static analysis tools. Ndepend, SonarQube, any number of tools will let you know what complexity looks like. Those same tools will also help you with dependencies, and they'll give you metrics around afferent and efferent coupling. That's incoming dependencies and outgoing dependencies. Use those same tools and get a picture for the size of classes and methods. You know, thankfully over time we've gotten an understanding that, you know, classes which are 10,000 lines of code are a bad thing. Same thing with methods that are really long. Methods should be very short, and you know, you absolutely should be able to look at a method on one screen. And that doesn't mean take your 27-inch monitor and flip it vertically so that you've got this huge page of code that you can look at. Rather, there are standards around all of these things: complexity, dependency, size of classes. Use those tools and figure out where the worst offenders are. Additionally, take a look at how much churn you have in your source code repository. There are tools out there that will let you pull up kind of history of churn. And by churn, I mean a lot of commits and touching of files or modules or classes. If we're having a lot of interaction with a module or with a class or with a method, that's a hotspot, and it indicates that that thing is a problem because we're constantly having to fix bugs in it, or we're constantly having to tinker with it so that we can extend functionality elsewhere. If there's high churn, that's a really good smell that that thing's a problem. So you get all of this stuff together, right? Tickets, bugs, you know, support incidents, all of those metrics from static code analysis. And where are the overlaps? If we look at the overlap of all of those pieces, that gives us kind of highlighted areas to focus in on. And then at this point, we can start to draft up some high-level work things. We don't want to dive in too deep. Instead, you know, for example, if we think about that billing provider problem, we might have an epic that is around improve error handling and exception handling for the invocation. So we're not down at the user story yet, but we're trying to focus in on a smaller area of the big problem so that we can rationally build up a reasonable estimate about the level of effort. And what we're trying to do is give product and business a semi-realistic picture of what it's going to take to fix that. Now, everybody who's been around estimates has always had the problem that they turn into deadlines and commitments. That's a bigger cultural thing, and we have to make sure that expectations are clear. Like, hey, we're going to look at this and we think it's about this amount of time. We're probably wrong, which is why it's an estimate and not an exactament. But, you know, this is our best faith thing. So now we've got a list of actual work that we want to do. We've defined what we need to do, not just fix billing, but rather look at this area of the billing provider. And we've got a rough idea of the level of effort. So now the cool thing here is that at this point, business who decides the priorities can look at what the new work is. Okay, we need to build this new feature and it's going to take us this long. But if we do this, then we can take on that work to fix the billing provider. And then we can do this other piece of new feature work. And then we can go fix that security problem. So that, again, the point is trying to get them to a place where they can decide on how to weave in fixes with delivering new value. And the output of this area now becomes some prioritized goals and an understanding of how we can start to weave that stuff moving forward. So excuse me while I get a quick drink here. All right, so we've gotten an agreement to fix. We are narrowing in on what to fix. Now it's time for us to get a little more granular about how we're actually going to do the fixes. And the output of this, now we are going to get down to user stories or work items, whatever it is that you've got on in your particular system, because everybody runs their shops differently, and that's okay. So again, the goal of this exercise is to build out good work items. But we need to change how we've been doing stuff. And the likelihood of having unclear and poorly defined work as being part of the reason that we're at where we're at now, that's probably really high. So as we're starting to make this shift, we've got to change how we work. And one of the best, easiest ways to start that change is by doing more work up front around the clarity of what you're building and why you're doing it. Cucumber and gherkin do not solve all the problems. They bring their own set of baggage, but what they're interesting for is how they can be helpful in driving good conversations. And if you throw away cucumber and gherkin and you don't go down that road, that's 100% fine, but having the conversations is really crucial. And this is an older book called Specification by Example. It's about how to build up really good specifications for work that you're planning on doing. And it's about having effective conversations. Gojko Adjic, the fellow that wrote this, has a number of books in this space. There are other people that write on this space. And if you're not aware of them and you're not reading them, you need to start like yesterday or earlier. I don't care if you go down the road of cucumber and all of that tooling, that brings on a whole bunch of baggage and mess. Help have better communication up front so you're clearer about how you're going to build things. Now we got to confront the really ugly bit of truth here, which is that we have a crappy system and a crappy code base that's poorly architected, that's brittle, that's likely badly documented, and is so tightly coupled. How are we going to break things apart there? And like, I've been in the middle of this, right? I've been the cause of some of this, and it's hard to start pulling that stuff off. All of the TDD dogmatists, one of the things that drives me apeshit about them, that gives me difficulty with them, is that dogmatic view that doesn't really address the challenges of writing good testing when you've got this code base that's a big pile of poo. If you're not aware of Michael Feather's book, Working Effectively with Legacy Code, go buy it today. Seriously. If you are in any kind of a legacy code base, this book is a wonderful guide on how to start breaking apart systems and how to figure out and deal with and encapsulate some of the brittle pieces. The book's like 20 years old, maybe or so. So, it's not the coolest fanboy technology that got released yesterday, but the concepts are crucial here. You know, he talks about dealing with monoliths. He talks about being able to inject shims in between parts of the system so that you can isolate something, get some testing around that piece that you've carved out. It's really awesome to help you plan out a map of how you're going to deal with this terrible chunk of code or architecture. Can't recommend it enough. So again, part of the reason that we've gotten to the point that we are right now is we've had bad practices in the past. And it's not like people were intending to get us to this bad spot we're at. There's a whole lot of stuff about skills and capabilities and learning more modern ways of doing things and about continually improving. Again, anything that y'all may be suffering with in your current work, this is not directed personally at you, because I have done whatever you all have done, and I've probably done it worse. But the thing is, if you don't change how you work, how are things going to change? That's kind of recursive and redundant, but you get the point, I hope. So one of the quickest things I find when I'm starting to work in code bases that are troublesome is simply improving readability. There are umpteen hundred studies that have data that show code is read many more times than it's edited or written in the first place. Depending on which study you look at, it's 8 times more that it's read or 20 times more that it's read. If the intent of the block of code that you're looking at is not clear, it's going to take you a crap ton of time to try to decipher what's going on here. Oh, okay, this is opening up a database connection. Oh, we're creating an invoice order. Oh, I'm invoking a web service here. One of the best things you can do is reword blocks of code that you're struggling with. Now, I say reword and not rewrite. And I mean that very intentfully. If you're trying to discern what's going on, simply rephrasing a variable name or a class name or a method name so that it's more understandable, so that the intent is clearer more quickly, that's a big win. I'm not changing statements. I'm not changing blocks of code. Rather, as I'm trying to spelunk into something, I'm improving the readability. And hopefully there's unit tests around there so I can ensure I'm not breaking things. You have to be very careful, but this can be a really quick win as you're trying to kind of, unwind the ball of yarn or whatever your bad metaphor is. We want to start to figure out and break out some of the complexities. This may involve creating some of the shims that Feather talks about, in his book, so that we can get some tests around a block of code. But once we can do that, as we start to pull out complexities, whether we've got, the inevitable multi-depth, multi-layered if statements, which are horrible, if we can start to break some of that out, at least we clear up some of the flow, and it doesn't solve the larger complexity, but we can at least make smaller pieces of that and eliminate some of those. Cut dependencies wherever possible. Again, go back to the static code for that particular area that you're working on and understand how many different calls you've got coming into one class or one module. If there's a huge number of them, have a consideration that maybe there are some design issues there, and we need to look at ripping that apart a bit so that we can make it a little more flexible and a little more easy to modify. One of the biggest problems that's really endemic across our industry is working in big chunks. And it doesn't matter about your user story sizing because everybody's points are different, and that's fine. But the notion is that if I've got a chunk of work that as one unit of work, it takes me a week or two to do that, just stop. Don't do that. step back and figure out how to decompose that thing. We want to work as small as possible, and we want to get brutal about thin slicing. I would challenge everyone to look at user story sizing. I'm using user stories, but whatever your work item is, right? Figure out how to make a unit of work that you can do in 1 day or less. It may seem extreme, but I'll tell you, not only is it possible, it's absolutely attainable. And the thing is, as we start to go from chunks of work that are weeks in size, which is just freaking stupid, and stop it now, as we go to smaller units of work, we can be very clear on what we're doing there. We can make sure that we've got crystal clear acceptance criteria for this unit of work. We can make sure that we know what we're able to break out and get some automated testing around from unit and API. And we can make sure that then the testers, when they're involved, have a small granular piece. And the cool thing is that we do these small pieces, we improve our flow through the system, and I can get that out and deployed into whatever appropriate environment in a much faster fashion. And moreover, we know that the risk of side effects of something small versus something big are dramatically reduced. So we're cutting risk, we're improving flow, we're improving quality. And if it turns out that we deployed this small unit of work and it blew something up, it's easier to roll back that one small unit. Focus hard on breaking down those big pieces of work. And I try not to be dogmatic or harsh about things, but if you have units of work that are a week or more in size, stop. Just stop. It's bad. It'll be hard, but you can break those down. You might not be able to get down to a half day or 1 day, but break those big pieces of work down. All right. So now we're at the point where we've actually got a list of concrete granular tasks to do. So it's time now to start fixing stuff. So, here I am 35 minutes or so into this talk, and we're finally getting to the place where we're building stuff. But I want to emphasize, this is partially the least important part of this entire exercise. Everything that we did previously about building consensus, about planning out good work, that's the harder stuff. But now we got to make sure that we're actually walking the walk, and we're going to live up to doing things better. The output of this is working stuff. We as people in software delivery ought to be really excited when we're able to metaphorically push a button and deliver good value. I mean, that's exciting. It really is. At the heart, I'm a kid who just likes hooking 2 wires together and seeing a light come on. So how do we get there? We have a culture that got us to this point where we're in trouble. We've got to address the culture first. And if we don't address the culture, we're going to be in trouble. And did I mention that we need to actually address the culture? I hammer home on this because we have to build an environment in the team room that really helps everybody support each other in changing how the work gets done. So it's constant open collaboration. It is the expectation that we hold each other accountable. We have to follow the new patterns of work. So for example, if a product owner is trying to inject new work in the middle of a sprint, the rest of the team can say, wait a minute, that's not how we roll. Remember, we got an agreement that we plan out the sprint and we finish that. We can address your need at the next sprint or in the next release, but right here, we're focusing on the work we're doing. Or if a developer is skipping, is just trying to work faster and has fallen into the old habits of unreadable code that's overly complex, that isn't unit tested, we can hold each other accountable there. One of the best ways to do that is by pairing up. And I don't just mean developer pair programming, dev-dev. you can have a developer and a tester work together. You can have a tester and a scrum master work together. By pairing up, you're getting more of that accountability, but more importantly, you're getting different views and different voices into how the work gets done, and you're helping back each other up. I'm a firm believer in the value of pair programming. Pairing as a whole, though, can be really, really difficult. It's scary, it's hard to do, it is emotionally draining. And for those of us, like me, who suffer from imposter syndrome, man, this gets scary because everybody else is going to see how freaking stupid I really am. And that's a hard emotional and mental barrier to get over. But you don't have to pair for 8 hours a day. And moreover, I don't think you should be. But if you start with small exercises like, hey, can you help me for 20 minutes? Hey, can you help me work on this one task that's part of this user story? Do it in small steps. And over a long time, like a year, you will find extraordinary benefits. I've seen tremendous things happen from testers over time pairing up with developers, and it upped everybody's game, and it was hard and they hated it. There are cultural things. It's hard, but the benefits are really, really solid. Do it in small steps. So the next thing is code reviews. And in general, I hate code reviews because most often they're done really, really badly. If your idea of a code review is to pull every member of the team into one room, whether it's a Zoom call or in a physical room, and put somebody's code up on a screen and then everybody walks through and criticizes it, stop doing it. Just freaking stop already. Because all that does is crush the morale and effectiveness of your team. Pair programming is the best code review you can possibly have because you got two sets of eyes looking at one block of code and one flow and the tests and everything about it. And it's happening real time with no delay. If you can't do that and you need to figure out code reviews, do them as small as possible, like one pull request. And that pull request ought to be like, if you're doing TDD, it should be one set of tests and the system code behind it. If you're not doing TDD, it should be small, discrete chunks of work, not one entire feature. If you break down the size of what's being reviewed, you can then figure out faster ways to make that code review happen. Pull requests should not be sitting in some queue for days or, God forbid, weeks. Figure out how to reprioritize your flow, reduce your capacity, make those code reviews happen in small chunks and make them happen continually through a day. Like, whoever, you can figure out different ways to do this. Point being, if somebody submits a PR, that PR should be addressed within an hour or two. Suss out how to do that. And it's not easy, but if you have to hinge all of your stuff on code reviews, make them small, make them effective, make them fast, and make them humane. Being a tester, I might be biased, but testing is really cool. And I'm not going to beat that anymore to death. Just leverage your testers because they have great superpowers. If your branching strategy requires branches to go off and live out someplace for weeks or months before you merge back into main or your trunk, figure out how to fix that. So I've been on product teams. I've had to deal with multiple versions of things. I understand that branching is complex, but I am a passionate, firm believer in trunk-based development. And if there's a need for a branch, there should be a hard, argumentative discussion. And I don't mean a fight, but just a serious debate about why we need this branch for anything more than a tiny short amount of time. And if it's days or weeks, or God forbid, months, take a step back and figure out what you have to fix. I'm not the branching genius, right? That's not my forte. What I do know is complex, long-lived branches suck for all the bad reasons. Don't do it. Figure out a better way. All right, so the last thing, or the next thing here is metrics, because we all love metrics, right? Yeah, no. Over the years, we have screwed up all kinds of productivity benefits and morale by measuring really stupid crap. On the development side, years or decades ago, we figured out that measuring lines of code was freaking stupid because it promotes bad behavior with bad actors. Oh, look, I wrote 10,000 lines of code. I must be great. No, your 10,000 lines of code suck. The guy who wrote 50 lines of code is far better. So measuring activity doesn't get us the benefits that we're looking for. Like counting the number of test cases is just as stupid as counting lines of code. Because we're talking about activity, we're not talking about effectiveness. So figure out how to measure outcomes. For example, like burn down charts are great. It's sort of a combination of activity and outcome. You know, we committed to this amount of work. Are we on target? Are we on track to meet our commitment? That's an outcome, meeting the commitment. You know, mean time to failure, mean time to recovery. Those are talking about outcomes, like how quickly can we fix a bug and get the system back to a useful state. Something else that I'm very passionate about is don't make metrics just for metrics' sake. Figure out who needs to make a decision, like about releases, about shipping. What questions do they have that they have to answer to determine, are we good to release? Well, generally, it's like, is all of our work done? Do we have open defects? How are we progressing to meet the schedule? Figure out the metrics to answer those things. There's all kinds of things that we can look at for our complexity and our static analysis, for example, again, that's showing an outcome, and we can change behavior based on them. But if you're simply measuring activity, please just stop. It's all there for the wrong idea. And if you're a proponent of lean, like I am, that kind of stuff is 100% waste. So there we go. We're through things, and hopefully we've got working stuff. This is not easy. This is not simple. You have to change culture. You have to change your practices. And then, oh my God, there's all of the crap in the existing difficult legacy code base that we've got to re-architect, rework. But the thing is, if you can take on some of these ideas and you're willing to do the hard work about changing culture and practices, you can get to this point of having a lot better time at work, of spending fewer weekends and nights with ops support problems or deployments over weekends. You can get there. It's not easy. It's a process, and there's a lot of arguments and debates and blood, sweat, and tears. But man, I've been through this a number of times at different organizations, and after a year, life is a whole lot better. So again, I don't pretend like this is a magic set of answers. This is just a way to work collaboratively between the tech side of folks and the business side and everybody in between to try to figure out, does it make sense? Do we indeed need to change? Can we fix things? What do we need to do? How are we going to do it? And then trying to be very disciplined about changing the behaviors that got you to this place in the first point. So that's it. Thanks for listening up. You know, here's my contact information again. And if folks have questions, I'd be happy to do my best about answering them or do some really good jazz hands.
Thanks so much, Jim. Yeah, any questions? Anybody got any follow-ups? I had a couple quick thoughts, but I'll wait, share mine until others maybe get in.
I have one. Jim, that Construct Connect, I saw you guys have someone posted in jobs, if you guys potentially, if you feel like you're in a sucky software position and want to switch, is that something they should reach out to you for? Like
100%. So I'm pretty open kimono. All of this mess that I just talked about, including the flaming dumpster fire and the outhouse on fire, I am in the middle of right now at work. But I joined this knowing about all of that because the people that I'm working with are 100% on board about having to change. So if anybody out there is interested in coming into a challenging environment with awesome leadership, not me, but the people above me, where you have the opportunity to make a difference, 100% reach out. Would love to have a conversation. And we got a bunch of different roles open, devs. We've got some testers, site reliability engineers, constructconnect.com/careers. Would love to have people chat with us.
You already hired one of ours, by the way, and you'll just have to figure out who it is.
All good. So there was a point, Jim, where you were kind of going through where you mentioned bugs, and I was like, well, not everybody calls it a bug, right? Some people call it a defect, some call it an issue, some delineate between them. And there was a point where in my head I was like, it doesn't matter per Jim's view, I would guess, right? So, and then similarly, the tech debt versus cruft versus just bad code. Like ultimately, I would suggest, and I would maybe see if you agree, it's all kind of one and the same, and it's really about acknowledging that and getting a handle of it, right?
Amen. At the end of the day, I don't give a rat's ass. It's just work.
Yep.
And stop arguing about whether it's a bug or a defect. I don't care. It's work. And I obviously have some strong opinions.
All good.
We've got this fire over here, and you're arguing about what the shape of an ice cube is.
Yep.
It's work. Let's figure out which work matters the most. And I don't care if it's tech debt or whatever, or open bugs. Let's just go get the work done so it stops hurting less.
Yes. Very cool.
Stops hurting less. That was really badly phrased.
I like it. Works for me. And yes, I would just say your strong opinions are very valued. That's why you're here. So thank you. Just real quick, in those opinions, same backlog or different backlogs to manage the new value versus fixes? Just curious if you have thoughts there.
It's all work.
I had a feeling that might be your answer. I know I have an opinion. It's all in the same place because that just makes it easy to talk, right?
And so thank you for asking that, because organizations get to a level of kind of learned helplessness and dysfunction. And it's not because people are bad. It's just they're overcomplicating stuff, right? And if I have multiple backlogs and multiple channels of discussion and different workflows for bugs and defects and improvements in architecture, man, how am I supposed to keep any of that straight? I am not smart. I need one place to go and look at what we need to do.
Beautiful. Hey, those were my quick thoughts. Anybody, again, did that spark any other additional thoughts?
So I saw there were a bunch of things in chat. I don't know if there were any open questions from that.
There was, one that just kind of came in here, perhaps. Some red flags to avoid with the dev teams and the PMs that, let's see. Kind of like which is the most important thing, and hard to tell sometimes in the orgs. I think that kind of hinted to the things we were just talking about, right? Like it's all part of that. We overcomplicate it, and therefore we gets messy, right?
Yeah. So if I understand that right, it's kind of speaking to the dynamic of who's most important on teams. It's a culture thing. Nobody's more important than each other, right? The devs have very critical experience and they build things. The testers have extraordinary experience and they know stuff. The PMs have great views, right? some of this gets into just human dynamics. There's a lot of great reading around concepts like emotional intelligence that can kind of help with some of those dynamics. Christine, if I misunderstood your context there, let me know. Devs are there to support the business. Devs don't earn money. The work they do does. It's a hard dynamic.
Yeah, I like the idea of servant leadership goes all directions, right? And we all serve one another, I think is a good, way to bring that to light.
It absolutely does, because everybody's voice is equally important. Some may be a little more so at certain phases, right? But just getting that notion of everybody's valued is crucial. And that may seem touchy-feely, but man, it's crucial, because this gets to team norms and team behavior. And you've got to make sure that it's a productive environment before you write any line of code.
Well, awesome. I think we're wrapping up on time. Jim, thanks again so much for joining us. Those that were able to follow along with the chat, I dropped a bunch of links for all of Jim's stuff along the way. However, probably most important is the last link I threw out there of our events at Canton Coders. Within that has this particular event, and within that thread in Jim's bio has all of his links that are important. Minus maybe this your email here on the Construct Connect side, but folks can certainly jot that down. It was a pleasure having you, my friend. Thanks again for joining us and sharing today. Let's all stay in touch as best we can. I see now we have a Discord channel. Let's reach out and chat through there if we can, or certainly in the Slack world as well. Cool. Any parting thoughts, Jim?
Thanks a bunch for having me in. You may have noticed I'm a little passionate about this particular stuff because I've been through it. Part of the reason I have gray hair and a damaged liver is getting through this exact painful stuff. It can be done. It just takes a lot of time. Set realistic expectations. But I tell you, this is a worthwhile struggle and journey.
Very cool. Awesome. Thanks so much, everyone. Have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thanks a bunch, everybody.
And we're done broadcasting, but we can hang out here and look at each other's shoes or talk.
So
yeah, very cool.
It's all recorded, Jim.
I appreciate that offer. I've actually got to bounce back to work.
That's
in here. So.
Yeah.